Most people believe that wealth belongs only to those with extraordinary opportunities, entrepreneurs, heirs, or those who stumble into fortune. But hear me clearly. Wealth comes to the person whose inner life agrees with wealth, not to the person with the right job, but to the person with the right word. You may be sitting in a small office, fluorescent lights humming overhead, repeating the same tasks day after day. You may look at your paycheck and think, how could abundance ever come from this? Yet the truth is astonishing. Supply does not come from your job. Supply comes through your job. Pause for a moment and let that settle in your spirit. When you confuse the channel with the source, you shrink your life to the size of your salary. But when you recognize that your source is infinite and only uses your job as one small avenue among thousands, the whole world becomes a treasury open to you. I want you to picture something. You are walking home from work, tired, heavy-hearted, thinking of bills, commitments, hopes you have pushed aside for years. You whisper, I can never get ahead, not on this income. And life, obedient as always, simply mirrors that decree. This is the hidden poverty of the 9 to 5 life. Not the paycheck, but the prophecy spoken over it. If you continue speaking lack, the next year will look exactly like this one. Scraping by, shrinking dreams, nights spent calculating what you cannot afford. Not because you are meant for smallness, but because the law cannot bring you a harvest of abundance from seeds of doubt. But hear the promise hidden in this warning. One right word spoken with faith can lift you out of limitation faster than any promotion, degree, or opportunity. The shift begins inside, and the outer conditions must follow. Let me paint a scene from a life very much like yours. A woman once came to me earning an ordinary salary, modest, predictable, barely enough. She believed her income was fixed, but she began a simple spiritual practice. Every morning, she declared that her supply came from God, not from her employer. She blessed her job as a channel, and she refused to speak a single word of complaint or limitation. Within months, new streams of money opened, unexpected payments, creative ideas that blossomed into income, opportunities she had overlooked. She did not work harder. She worked aligned, and that alignment made her wealthy. Let me tell you something that may shake you awake. Wealth is not earned, it is permitted. It is permitted by the state of mind you choose each day, by the words you speak over your finances, and by the faith you place in the source of your supply. The person who insists, I can only earn what my job pays, lives within that prison. The person who declares, God is my immediate and unlimited supply, walks free, even if they begin with pennies. And I will show you how to become wealthy exactly where you stand. But first, let us name the danger. If you treat this message as mere inspiration, your conditions will not change. If you listen while still believing your employer determines your prosperity, you will stay bound to the figures on your paycheck. Ignore this law, and you do not escape it. You only prove it against yourself. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine waking tomorrow with absolute certainty that your income is not limited by your salary. Imagine feeling supported, expanded, provided for. Imagine watching money appear from unexpected channels, small and large, because your words have opened the way for it. This is not fantasy. It is spiritual mathematics. When you speak abundance, you align with abundance. When you speak limitation, you bind your own hands. Let me give you another picture. A man once worked a simple 9 to 5 job, faithfully, quietly, with little hope of advancement. He believed life had passed him by. Yet he began affirming daily, I have a magical purse of the Spirit. Money comes to me in perfect ways for every need. He expected nothing dramatic. He simply refused to speak lack. Within a year, his savings multiplied. investments grew, and opportunities appeared he once dismissed as, "Not for someone like me." He said, "It felt as if the world was conspiring to prosper me." It was, because he had finally spoken the right word. Let me speak directly to your heart now. Wealth is not about your job. Wealth is about your consciousness. Your job is only one pipe in a vast spiritual plumbing system. The source of water is infinite, and that infinite supply will flow to you the moment you stop cursing the pipe. You must stop saying, "I can't afford it." You must stop saying, "I'll never be wealthy." You must stop saying, "My salary is too small." These sentences are spells, and they bind your finances. Replace them with truth. Every day, new channels of supply open for me. What is mine by divine right now comes in abundance. I prosper wherever I work, because God prospers through me. Speak these words faithfully. Speak them as law. Speak them until your subconscious becomes incapable of expecting anything but prosperity. Now hear the great promise beneath this entire message. You can become wealthy on a 9-to-5 salary because your salary is not your source. Your wealth begins the moment you stop worshiping numbers and begin trusting the infinite. If you listen closely, if you apply this truth with courage, if you speak these words each morning with expectation, you will watch your life rise in ways that defy arithmetic. Your income will grow. Your opportunities will multiply. Your debt will dissolve. Your confidence will strengthen. And one day, you will wake and realize you have crossed into abundance not by force, but by law. So listen now, as if heaven itself were handing you the key. Because the path to becoming a millionaire does not begin with money. It begins with the word you speak over your money. When one begins to understand the true law of supply, a great light dawns upon the path, and the whole world seems to rearrange itself in obedience to this new knowing. I speak now from the authority of experience, for I have watched countless men and women walk out of bondage to their salaries and into a life of true abundance, without changing their positions, without pleading for raises, without exhausting themselves to earn a few extra coins. They did it by changing their inner speech, for the spoken word is the key which unlocks every treasure house. So let us begin, you and I, by sweeping aside the old belief that your employer is responsible for your prosperity. This is the first lie of poverty, and until it is dissolved, no true riches can come. Your employer is not your supply, any more than a single window is the sun. The window merely allows the light to pass through. If the window were removed, the sun would still shine. So it is with your salary. It is simply one avenue through which the infinite may choose to pour your good. But the source itself is eternal, unfailing, and utterly independent of your present circumstances. When you understand this, the walls of your small room fall away, and you begin to see yourself as a channel through which plenty flows, not a container limited to the measure of your wages. I knew a man who worked in a tiny shop where the shelves sagged with dust, and the day passed slowly with few customers to break the monotony. He would stand behind the counter and sigh, saying, "My wages are small because this place is small," and the law faithfully reproduced his words. He remained exactly where he was, receiving exactly what he had decreed. One day, he heard me say, "Man's word is his wand," and something in him awakened. He began blessing the shop, blessing the very walls, blessing the few customers who came, and most of all, blessing his employer. Instead of muttering complaints, he said each morning, "God is my immediate and endless supply. I have wonderful work in a wonderful way, and I give wonderful service for wonderful pay." At first, nothing seemed to happen, but the change had begun invisibly. Within weeks, the owner of the shop sent him on small errands, then entrusted him with ordering certain goods, then placed him in charge of a special line of merchandise which earned commissions. His entire manner changed. He walked straighter, spoke more confidently, and soon others remarked upon his improvement. It was not the shop that changed, it was the man who changed, and the shop simply obeyed the new pattern he held in mind. I have seen again and again how people shrink their entire lives to the size of their paychecks. They say, "I am paid so little," and so they are. They say, "My salary never stretches far enough," and it obeys by stopping short. They say, "I can never rise beyond this position," and so their feet remain glued to the same square of ground year after year. Every such word is a spiritual decree, and the subconscious carries it out with exact precision. It has no sense of humor. It cannot overlook your careless speech. It is the faithful servant which accepts every statement as law. So when you say, "I am poor," it begins arranging conditions to match the image. When you say, "Money is scarce," it obliges by blocking the very channels through which supply might flow. But when you say, with absolute conviction, "Every day, in every way, new channels of supply open for me," the law must respond, for you have spoken from truth, not fear. Let me give you the picture of a woman who came to me quite exhausted with worry. She worked in a narrow office beneath the hum of fluorescent lights, filing papers and answering the same questions day after day. She told me she earned a modest salary and saw no hope of change. Her shoulders drooped with defeat, and even her clothing seemed to carry the weight of limitation. I told her gently, "Your job is not your supply. It is merely the window through which you now look. But your good is pressing against the pane, waiting for your word to enter." I instructed her to bless every part of her work: her desk, her pen, her hours, her employer, her co-workers, even the telephone that rang incessantly. She was to say each morning, "I am God's perfect instrument of supply. I prosper wherever I work, for God prospers through me." She obeyed with sincerity. Soon she noticed that people responded to her differently. Her employer commented on her poise. Her co-workers sought her help and spoke of her calm presence. Her face brightened and her step became lighter. Then the miracles began. An old friend repaid a forgotten debt. A relative sent her a gift, just because. And her supervisor offered her an opportunity for overtime that she could accept or decline at will. Within 6 months, she was earning more than she had believed possible in that little office. Her prosperity did not come from effort. It came from alignment. In every office, every shop, every classroom, there are 2 workers: the one who labors with his hands and the one who labors with his words. The first is bound by circumstance. The second commands circumstance. When you understand this twofold nature, you realize that the inner worker must be trained before the outer worker can prosper. You may toil from morning until night and gain nothing but fatigue, or you may speak a single right word and watch conditions rearrange themselves with speed and grace. I once knew a man who frequently joked that he was one step from the poorhouse, and the law took him at his word. His rent increased, his debts mounted, and he found himself truly on the brink of disaster. When he came to me in great distress, I said, "Drown the reasoning mind with your affirmation. Declare, there is no loss in divine mind. Therefore, I cannot lose anything that belongs to me." He began repeating it with earnestness, and soon his affairs reversed themselves. A forgotten investment yielded unexpected returns, and a burdened expression left his face forever. You may protest and say, "But I must speak what is true. My salary is small, and my expenses are great." My dear friend, you must speak not what is true to appearances, but what is true to God. If appearances ruled man, he would remain forever enslaved to the evidence of his senses. But when Moses stood before the Red Sea, he did not say, "The waters are deep, we cannot cross." He raised his rod and parted the sea. So must you raise your word and part the waters of limitation. Say not, "I am underpaid," but say, "I am adequately and divinely compensated." Say not, "There is never enough," but say, "My supply is endless, immediate, and abundant." You are not lying when you speak these words. You are speaking from the realm of perfect ideas, which is the only realm where truth truly lives. As you persist in right speech, your entire identity undergoes a transformation. You begin to feel yourself carried by unseen forces. You walk as one who expects good. Your eyes lift from the narrow horizon of your paycheck to the boundless sky of God's treasury. Others will notice. They will sense something different in you, a quiet assurance, a peaceful strength. They will trust you with greater responsibility because they feel the radiance of divine order emanating from you. Promotion often follows such a change, not because you demanded it, but because you became equal to it in consciousness. The outer world is always a faithful mirror of the inner. Each time you enter your workplace, imagine yourself stepping onto holy ground. Let the humming lights above you become the music of angels. Let the papers before you become the very bricks with which you build your prosperity. Say silently as you begin your tasks, "Every move I make increases my supply, for God works through me in perfect ways." As you answer the telephone, think, "This call brings good." As you complete your assignments, think, "This work blesses me and all whom it touches." You will be astonished to see how the smallest change in thought produces the largest change in experience. Soon you will find that life flows more smoothly, people respond more kindly, and opportunities arise where none existed before. There is great spiritual power in the simplest declarations. Each morning as you rise, speak firmly, "I expect the unexpected. My good now comes to pass." Expectation is the magnet drawing the thing you desire out of the invisible into the visible. When you expect poverty, poverty obeys. When you expect wealth, wealth hastens toward you. This is not imagination, it is law. The farmer expects a harvest because he has planted seeds. You too must plant the seed of prosperity with your words and water it daily with faith. Let me tell you of another woman whose transformation was a marvel to behold. She worked for many years as an assistant in a bustling office where she was often overlooked. She believed herself insignificant and accepted the smallest tasks without joy. When she began to study truth, she understood that she must become a vessel of greater capacity. She began to declare, "What is mine by divine right now comes to me in perfect ways." She blessed her employer, her tasks, her co-workers, and even the building where she spent her days. She ceased all complaint, for she knew that complaint is a prayer for more of the same. Soon, the atmosphere around her changed, as though the air had become lighter. People began complimenting her composure. One day, quite unexpectedly, the employer asked her to oversee a new project, saying, "You have a steadiness that inspires confidence." She accepted, and with the increased responsibility came increased pay. Later, another opportunity opened through a client she had assisted kindly. Her income doubled, and she found herself living in a new rhythm of joy. All this came because she exchanged the old speech of lack for the new speech of abundance. My dear friend, do not despise the day of small things. Your desk, your tools, your hours, your humble duties, These are the very fields where you may sow the seeds of limitless good. Bless them, and they will bless you. Curse them, and they will curse you. Life is your obedient servant, shaping itself to the mold of your words. So speak as one who knows that the treasury of heaven stands open before you, waiting only for your acceptance. And now I say to you with full authority, wealth does not come to the person who waits for it. Wealth comes to the person who speaks it, prepares for it, and walks as though it were already at hand. The whole universe rushes to fulfill the word that is spoken with faith. So let your words be worthy of the abundance that longs to find you. For when you declare, God is my supply and every day I prosper, the law begins its silent work, and in due time, your salary will become but one of many channels through which your endless good flows. When man begins to listen for the quiet voice within, he discovers that no circumstance is as fixed as it appears, and no path as narrow as the reasoning mind would have him believe. I have often said that prayer is man telephoning to God, and intuition is God telephoning to man, and nowhere is this more evident than in the life of one who feels hemmed in by a modest salary and the routine of a daily occupation. For intuition reveals rivers in the desert, hidden doors in familiar rooms, and gold beneath the very ground one has walked over for years without suspecting its presence. When intuition awakens, the commonplace becomes enchanted, and the worker in the humblest position finds that he stands not in a cramped hallway of fate, but at the threshold of 1,000 opportunities he had never before perceived. There was a young man who worked faithfully in an office where his duties rarely varied, and where he believed advancement was impossible. He would arrive each morning burdened by the thought, nothing new ever happens here. Yet the very monotony he despised kept him from hearing the still, small voice that would have guided him. One day, he came to me in discouragement. I said to him, if you would but listen for intuition, you would find that every day contains a miracle. Intuition does not shout, it whispers, and only the expectant ear can hear it. He began the practice I gave him. Before leaving for work each morning, he stood still for a moment and said, Infinite Spirit, reveal to me the next step. Let divine ideas come to pass. At first, he felt nothing at all, but intuition often arrives before man is aware of its presence. One morning, as he walked to the office, he felt strongly impelled to take a different street. He obeyed, though it seemed foolish, and on that very path, he encountered a former classmate who worked in a related field. They spoke briefly, exchanged information, and parted. This small meeting, insignificant to the untrained eye, opened a new channel. A month later, that same classmate called to say that a short-term project had arisen and that the young man was perfectly suited to assist. It paid handsomely, and his employer agreed to flexible hours. Thus began a sequence of events that led him into a line of work far more rewarding than the one he had believed he was confined to. When man obeys a hunch, he obeys God. The reasoning mind will always argue, this is unnecessary, this is unwise, this is not practical. But intuition sees from the mountaintop while reason stumbles in the valley. Many people confine themselves to barren experiences because they act only upon reason. Yet the magic path of intuition leads straight into abundance by the shortest, safest, and happiest route. I recall a woman who had long desired to increase her income, but saw no means of doing so. One evening, she felt impressed to take a walk, though she was tired and preferred to rest. She obeyed the impression, and during that walk, she passed a little shop she had never noticed before. A sign in the window announced that the owner was seeking part-time assistance with a task the woman was uniquely trained to do. She applied at once and was hired. The work was pleasant, the pay generous, and soon she found herself receiving commissions and additional opportunities that flowed naturally from the new connection. When she told me her story, she said with shining eyes, "It was as though a light had been placed on my path." And so it was, for intuition is the lamp unto our feet. Often it is not a great outward action that intuition requires, but a small shift in consciousness. There was a typist who dreaded her work and longed for a change. Yet, every evening she affirmed her dissatisfaction, saying, "I must escape this place." Nothing changed, for she was affirming bondage rather than freedom. When she began blessing her work and asking each morning, "Show me the right action," she found herself guided to take greater care with her typing, to beautify her workspace, and to speak kindly to those around her. These may seem trivial, but in spiritual law, nothing is trivial. Soon she was entrusted with letters of importance, then asked to assist with tasks of greater responsibility. Her employer discovered her accuracy and reliability, and before long, she was given a position that combined secretarial work with tasks requiring judgment and discretion, and with it came an increase in pay. She later laughed and said, "I did not leave the position left me, for the old place could not hold me when I changed my consciousness." Intuition had revealed to her not a new office, but a new self. When you begin to listen for intuition, others will notice a change in you long before you realize it yourself. They will see your calmness where there was once anxiety, your poise where there was once haste, your confidence where there was once confusion. They may not name it, but they will feel it, and that feeling will cause them to treat you with greater respect. Employers instinctively trust the person who walks in a lighted way, for such a one carries an atmosphere of certainty. You may find that your advice is sought more often, that your presence reassures others, that doors open quietly before you. This is the outward expression of the inner alignment. When man follows intuition, he becomes a spiritual tuning fork, vibrating to divine order, and all that is harmonious in the universe responds. But many people silence the intuitive voice through fear. They say, "What if I am mistaken? What if this leads nowhere? What if I fail?" My dear friend, intuition is never concerned with probability. It deals only in certainty. It is the voice of God within you, and God does not make mistakes. The only error man can make is to refuse to obey the guidance he receives. I knew a man who had a strong impression to telephone a certain acquaintance. He suppressed the impulse, thinking it unimportant. Days later, he learned that the acquaintance had sought someone to fill a profitable position and had already chosen another. "I felt that you would be the right person," the acquaintance said, "but I had no way to reach you." The man told me with regret. I ignored the small voice, and I answered, "The voice will speak again, but next time obey at once." For it is dangerous to stop in the middle of a hunch. The door that intuition opens may not remain open long, for it is opened in perfect timing. If you wish to cultivate intuition, begin each day with simple words. Infinite Spirit, reveal the next step. Let the divine idea come to pass. Say this quietly, without strain, and then go about your duties with an expectant heart. Do not search anxiously for signs. Intuition does not flourish under tension. Instead, hold the calm inner assurance that what you need to know will be revealed at precisely the right moment. If an idea comes to you before reasoning begins to argue, obey it. If the idea brings a sense of peace or rightness, it comes from spirit. If it brings fear or agitation, set it aside. Intuition leads by ease, not by strain. As you practice this listening, you will find that your days become smoother. You will be guided to speak the right word at the right time, to wait when waiting is wise, to act when action is needed. You will avoid difficulties that once entangled you and step into opportunities that once escaped you. The divine coincidence, where everything seems to fall into place, will become a frequent visitor. I once counseled a woman whose life was filled with delays and disappointments. She seemed always to be arriving a moment too late or encountering obstacles at every turn. I said to her, "You are pushing against the divine order. You are trying to force your way through doors that are not yet open." I instructed her to begin every morning by declaring, "I walk in a lighted way, and every step leads to prosperity." She obeyed faithfully. Soon she found herself arriving at perfect moments, meeting the right people, learning the right information, avoiding the wrong turns. She marveled at the change, saying, "It feels as though someone were going before me, arranging everything." And so it was, for intuition is indeed the forerunner of demonstration. Many people believe that intuition will lead them away from their present work, but often it simply leads them deeper into it. The divine idea may be to remain where you are, but with a new spirit, a new vision, and a new openness to channels of increase. Intuition does not always lead to dramatic changes. Sometimes it leads to a small shift that produces great results. For example, one might feel impelled to learn a new skill, to speak to a certain person, to take on a small project, to plant a seed of generosity, or to release an old resentment. Each intuitive act is a stone laid upon the path of prosperity. As the magic path of intuition becomes your daily companion, you will begin to perceive riches where others perceive routine. You will see potential where others see limitation. You will feel guided instead of trapped, led instead of confined. And it is this very shift in inner perception that opens the way for abundance. For wealth is not a matter of arithmetic, but of alignment. Now, as we stand upon this rising current of intuition, we must speak of preparation, for the divine idea demands a vessel into which it may pour itself. Intuition reveals the next step, but faith must make ready the ground. And so we come to the great law of active preparation, the digging of ditches before the rain, so that when your abundance rushes forth, it may find a place to dwell. When man begins to understand the law of preparation, he steps into the rhythm of divine timing, and nothing can withhold his good. Throughout the ages, those who achieved the greatest demonstrations were those who prepared before the evidence appeared. They set their stage while others waited for a sign. They dug their ditches while the sky was still cloudless. They acted as though the blessing were already descending, and by this very act, they summoned the blessing into manifestation. This is the secret most overlooked by those who long for prosperity. They wait to see the good before preparing for it, not knowing that the preparation itself is the magnet which draws the good forth. I have often spoken of the story of the 3 kings who were sent to dig ditches in a valley parched by drought. Though no rain clouds gathered, no wind stirred, and no hint of moisture hung in the air, they obeyed the divine instruction. They dug without questioning, without doubting, and without waiting for a sign. And during the night, long after they had ceased from their labor, the water quietly filled the ditches they had prepared. So it is with your prosperity. You must prepare the way before the expected increase appears, for your preparation is the evidence of your faith. And without faith, nothing enduring can be built. A man once came to me earnestly desiring greater income. He prayed fervently, spoke affirmations, and declared daily that supply was his by divine right. Yet nothing changed. I asked him gently, "Where will you place your increased income? Have you made ready the room for it?" He looked at me in surprise. His financial papers were scattered. his accounts confused, and his workspace cluttered with the debris of old failures. I told him to begin by putting his affairs in order, clear away old documents charged with fear, organize his accounts, and prepare a place where incoming funds might be received with dignity. As he obeyed these simple instructions, he felt a shift within. He said, "It is as though something is stirring." Soon after, an opportunity arose that he had overlooked for years, a quiet business connection that blossomed almost effortlessly. He later told me, "My prosperity was waiting at the door, but the doorway was blocked." Indeed, when man cleans his mental and physical house, he makes room for the guest he has invited. Another woman longed for a more abundant life, yet she held the belief that her small salary was all she could manage, and so she lived in cramped conditions, both inwardly and outwardly. I suggested she begin her preparation by purchasing one beautiful object which represented the life she desired, not extravagant, merely something that spoke of expansion. She hesitated, saying she could not justify such a purchase, but I urged her gently to take the step in faith. She bought a lovely vase, simple and elegant, and placed it where she would see it often. This single act stirred her subconscious, for the subconscious responds more readily to symbols than to words. It said, in effect, "I am preparing for beauty. I am preparing for increase." In less than a month, she received an unexpected sum of money, which allowed her to make further improvements in her home. Her surroundings lifted her spirit, and her spirit lifted her conditions. Soon, her income grew through channels she had never imagined. She later said, "That vase was my turning point." It was not the vase, of course, but the faith behind it, the willingness to behave as though good were already at hand. Faith must always be accompanied by action, for faith without action is merely a daydream. The action does not need to be large, it needs only to represent readiness. When you declare, "My supply comes from God," but cling fearfully to every coin, you prepare not for abundance, but for lack. When you declare, "My perfect work now appears," but continue treating your present work as drudgery, you prepare not for expansion, but for stagnation. You must prepare with your words, your thoughts, and your deeds, for the law cannot bring you a harvest of abundance from seeds of doubt. A young woman once asked me, "How shall I prepare for the demonstration of prosperity when I have so little?" I answered, "Begin with what you have. Clean your purse, organize your belongings, give away what no longer serves you, tidy your desk, refine your speech." The slightest gesture made in faith is a seed planted in the divine soil. She obeyed. She cleared her purse of old slips and worn papers, declaring, "I have the magic purse of the Spirit. It can never be depleted." She ordered her workspace, releasing objects associated with past failures, and arranged everything with intention. Soon, a new clarity filled her mind, and with it came new ideas. She was led to take a small training course that improved her skills, and her employer soon recognized her increased value. Her salary grew, and so did her confidence. She said to me later, "I felt as though I stepped into a larger room." Indeed, she had, for she prepared a larger room within herself. Man's outer world always reflects the arrangement of his inner world. When the inner chambers are cluttered with fear, resentment, confusion, or disbelief, the outer affairs mirror this disorder. But when those chambers are swept clean and set in order, the outer world responds with opportunity, clarity, and increase. Preparation is not merely an act of readiness, it is an act of recognition. It says to the universe, "I know my good is coming, and I make room for it now." The universe, hearing this declaration, hastens to fulfill it. I recall a woman who desired to marry, yet she prepared unconsciously for solitude. Her home held no space for another. Her table had but one chair. Her closets were filled to overflowing. She spoke often of depending on herself. I told her, "You are entertaining the idea of loneliness, and loneliness will continue to dwell with you." She was shocked, but she obeyed when I instructed her to make room for her heart's desire. She purchased an additional chair, rearranged her table, cleared space in her closets, and began speaking differently. I prepare my home and heart for companionship, under grace and in perfect ways. In less than a year, the right man appeared. This same law applies to prosperity, for man must prepare his consciousness before he may receive his increase. Now, some prepare, but for the wrong thing. They prepare for lack rather than abundance. They save money for a rainy day and guarantee a storm. They store supplies for hard times and thereby plant the seeds of hardship. They speak of just getting by and prepare their minds to remain small. A woman once proudly told me she kept a special drawer filled with items for emergencies only. I said, half in jest and half in truth, "My dear, you are preparing for trouble, and trouble is obedient." She looked startled, but understood the meaning. She transformed that drawer into a place for beautiful things. Gratitude notes, pleasant reminders, small expressions of joy. Her life changed accordingly. Let your preparation always match your desire. If you desire wealth, prepare as though wealth were already selecting its path toward you. If you desire promotion, prepare your work as though you were already entrusted with greater responsibilities. If you desire greater compensation, refine your skills, uplift your environment, speak as one who expects increase. Nothing so convinces the subconscious as the act performed in expectation. When man prepares for abundance, others perceive a change in him long before the demonstration appears. They notice his increased poise, his clarity of speech, his carefulness in action, his sense of purpose. He moves differently, he speaks differently. He gives off an atmosphere of expectancy which others instinctively respect. Employers perceive it as capability, co-workers perceive it as confidence, friends perceive it as promise. This shift in outer regard is the very beginning of the new channels forming. And now, as we prepare the way for your abundance, we must clear the path of every stone of resentment, fear, or resistance. For abundance cannot enter a heart that holds grudges or entertains bitterness. Before the gates of prosperity may swing open, the hinges must be oiled with forgiveness. For forgiveness is the great cleanser of consciousness, the dissolver of obstacles, the healer of hidden barriers. And so we move gently now into the law of forgiveness and non-resistance. For man cannot receive with clenched hands, nor rise while dragging chains of old wrongs behind him. When man attempts to rise while carrying resentments, fears, and old injuries in his heart, he is like a bird trying to soar with stones, tied to its wings. No matter how fervently he flaps, no matter how earnestly he prays, something pulls him downward. That something is the unhealed past, stored in the subconscious, shaping his expectations, narrowing his channels, closing the very doors he is trying to open. And nowhere is this more evident than in the realm of prosperity. For money, being a symbol of circulation, cannot flow freely toward one whose mind is congested with grievances. The law is exact. Where there is resentment, there is restriction. Where there is bitterness, there is blockage. Where there is unforgiveness, there is delay. Therefore, before man may receive wealth, he must first release the tight knots of the heart. Many people imagine that their financial difficulties arise from outer causes: poor wages, unfriendly employers, unfair circumstances, or a so-called lack of opportunity. Yet I have seen again and again that the true hindrance lies not in the outer world, but in the inner. A woman came to me who felt deeply wronged because a coworker had received a promotion she believed belonged to her. She carried this resentment like a burning coal, and her income stagnated accordingly. She said bitterly, "She took my place." I answered gently, "No one can take what belongs to you by divine right, and no one can keep you from it, but resentment blocks your own good." She resisted my words at first. Resentment always disguises itself as righteousness. But when she grew tired of struggling, she decided to follow the law. I told her to declare daily, "What God has done for others, He now does for me and more." This statement dissolved the sense of injustice, for it reminded her that another's gain was no loss to her. She persevered, and soon her resentment melted away. Within months, an entirely new position, far superior to the one she believed she had lost, opened for her. She came to me radiant, saying, "The moment I stopped resenting, my good rushed toward me." This law operates universally. A man once complained that his supervisor was the cause of all his troubles. "He withholds raises," the man said. "He overlooks my efforts, and he blocks every opportunity." I told him, "Bless your supervisor, for he is simply reflecting your belief in opposition. Declare, 'I am unmoved by appearances. God is my employer. God is my supply.'" At first, the man could hardly bring himself to bless the supervisor, but the law requires obedience, not agreement. He began speaking the words out of duty, then with sincerity. A curious thing happened. The supervisor's attitude softened. The man was given small privileges, then larger responsibilities, and at last a significant increase in pay. But the greater miracle was this. Before the change occurred, the man felt no more enmity. He said, "Something has lifted from me." Indeed, it had, the obstruction of his own resentment. Man's enemies are not outer people, but inner states. The Bible says, "A man's foes shall be they of his own household." This household is the subconscious, filled with old beliefs, memories, fears, and grudges. When these inner foes are active, man imagines he is beset by hostile people, yet it is only his own thought images returning to him. When he dissolves the resentment within, the so-called enemy without disappears or is transformed. I have seen lifelong adversaries become friends overnight when one party began sending thoughts of goodwill. Goodwill is a powerful solvent, gentle yet irresistible. It is the spiritual equivalent of oil poured upon rusty hinges. It makes the way easy. Non-resistance is closely allied to forgiveness. When man resists a circumstance, he energizes it. When he fights an injustice with bitterness, he multiplies it. But when he stands still and declares, "I now cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free," the entire situation rearranges itself. I once knew a woman who was perpetually embroiled in conflicts at her workplace. She believed everyone was against her. In truth, she resisted everything: her duties, her co-workers, her employer, even her daily commute. Her whole manner vibrated irritation, and irritation attracts more of its own. When she learned the law of non-resistance, she began silently saying, "I do not resist. I am poised, persistent, and powerful." She blessed the very people she once resented. In less than 2 months, the atmosphere changed completely. She found her co-workers unexpectedly helpful. Her employer commended her composure. Even her commute unfolded smoothly. She said, "It is as though the whole world relaxed with me." And so it was. Forgiveness also alters a man's countenance. I have often seen faces hardened by bitterness soften as forgiveness takes root. The eyes grow clearer, the jaw relaxes, the voice gentles. People respond to this change with trust and warmth. I once told a student, "If you would have the world treat you kindly, begin by treating the world kindly." She thought first I spoke only of deeds, but soon discovered that thoughts and feelings are the true conductors of experience. When she released a long-held resentment toward a former friend, she found her business improved, her social circle expanded, and even her family life grew harmonious. Forgiveness opened the channels of her entire life. Consider the apple seller I once encountered on a city street. His expression was stern and irritable, and he sold almost nothing. When I suggested that he smile, he replied angrily, "Someone has taken my corner." He resented the other vendor, and that resentment formed an invisible wall around him. "Bless the other man," I said. "Send him goodwill." The next day, he greeted people cheerfully, and his business flourished. Forgiveness and goodwill opened the channel that irritation had closed. If you wish to open the path to prosperity, begin by asking yourself, whom have I not forgiven? What situation do I resist? What old injustice do I treasure as though it were a valuable possession? Then release it. Say, I forgive everyone and everyone forgives me. I am free and they are free. You will feel a weight lift from your heart, and in that very moment, your prosperity begins to move. When the heart is cleared of old debris, the divine design of your life begins to shine forth like a sun. You perceive possibilities where none seemed to exist. You feel guided, uplifted, strengthened. And now the right work, the perfect self-expression, the true avenue of your talents and gifts, begins to reveal itself. For no man can enter his promised land while carrying the stones of resentment. Forgiveness clears the soil. Non-resistance softens it. Into this prepared ground, the seed of perfect self-expression may be planted. And so, having cleared the path, we now turn to your true work in life. Not merely the occupation you hold, but the divine pattern within you, waiting to unfold. When man speaks of his work, he often imagines only the task that fills his hours, the occupation that pays his rent and keeps bread on his table. Yet this is but the outer rind of a far deeper truth. Beneath the visible employment lies the invisible pattern, the divine design of one's perfect self-expression. Every soul is born with a particular radiance, a genius, a peculiar gift through which the infinite desires to manifest. When this inner pattern flows freely, man prospers, not by striving, but by being. He becomes as a well-tuned instrument through which divine harmony pours itself effortlessly. But when he tries to force himself into tasks unsuited to his nature, or when he thinks he is limited to the narrow duties assigned by others, he becomes like a violin played with the wrong bow, discordant, strained, and weary. Thus, the object is not to escape one's present position, but to find the thread of perfect self-expression within it. For spirit can use the simplest task to usher in the grandest destiny. I recall a woman who had worked for many years in the most ordinary office, performing tasks she considered dull and repetitive. She believed her gifts were wasted there, for she possessed a love for beauty, harmony, and refinement. Yet she never expressed these qualities, imagining that they had no place in her role. One day, she came to me feeling dispirited. I said to her, "Your present work contains the seed of your perfect work. Seek the divine idea within it." She followed this instruction with sincerity. She began to beautify her workspace, purely for the joy of doing it. She arranged flowers with care, kept her desk in perfect order, and wrote her correspondence with grace and skill. Her employer soon noticed these touches and asked her opinion on small matters of office decor. These queries gradually increased until she was overseeing the arrangement of the firm's reception room. Her natural gifts had made a place for her. Within a year, she was placed in charge of all aspects of presentation and environment for the company's clients. Her new position brought both joy and financial increase. She later said, "My perfect work was hidden inside my present work. I needed only to discover it. This is the law. Man's perfect work is never far from him. It does not lie in some distant land, nor await some dramatic change in circumstances. It lies within the very talents and desires that have always stirred his heart. These are clues left by Spirit. When man follows them, he finds his path widening. When he ignores them, he feels trapped." You may say, "But my job gives me no opportunity to express my gifts." I answer, begin expressing them quietly and faithfully where you stand. For perfect self-expression is not primarily a matter of outer opportunity, but of inner willingness. The moment you begin to express the divine pattern within, even in small ways, the universe rushes to create channels suited to that pattern. Every man and woman possesses what I call a magnetic talent, that special ability or quality that draws supply as naturally as a magnet draws iron. When man uses this talent, he is borne along currents of ease and joy. When he suppresses it, he feels strain and dissatisfaction. A man may have a magnetic talent for organization, for teaching, for design, for healing, for creating harmony, for managing details, for speaking, for inventing, or for inspiring. No two are alike, for each soul is a unique expression of the infinite. The key to prosperity is to let that magnetic talent shine, to weave it into every task, no matter how humble. When you do this, people begin to see you differently. They perceive a sparkle, a confidence, a strength. They may not even know what has changed, but they feel it, and they respond by offering opportunities that match the new vibration. Consider a man who worked in a warehouse, doing simple physical labor. He believed his position unimportant and his prospects limited, yet he possessed a natural ability to improve systems, to make things run smoothly. One day, inspired by an inner leading, he reorganized a small section of the storeroom during a quiet moment, making everything more orderly and efficient. The manager noticed and asked him to assist with a larger project. His talent soon became indispensable, and he was given a supervisory role, then a managerial one. His salary increased, and he found himself enjoying his work in a way he had never dreamed possible. He had not sought promotion. He had expressed his gift. The promotion sought him. Perfect self-expression is not forced. It unfolds. When man tries to force a path, he meets resistance. When he allows his inner design to reveal itself, he finds that the right work comes to him in perfect ways. I once counseled a young woman who longed to teach, but feared she lacked credentials. I told her, begin teaching where you are. Teach through kindness, through clarity, through the smallest opportunity. She began helping her co-workers with new tasks, explaining procedures patiently. Her manager noticed her ability and began assigning her to train new employees. In time, she was placed in charge of all instruction for her department, and her income multiplied. She said to me, "My teaching gift made its own place." The truth is this: no matter where you stand, whether in an office, a shop, a factory, a school, a kitchen, you are standing at the doorway of your destiny. The divine pattern seeks expression through your every act. When you bless your present work, when you say, "I have a wonderful work in a wonderful way, and I give wonderful service for wonderful pay," you align your consciousness with the divine design. Your work begins to shine, your talents unfold, your environment rearranges itself to honor your radiance. Others will notice this transformation. They will see a new steadiness in your eyes, a new grace in your movements, a new certainty in your tone. They may say, "You seem different," though they cannot name the difference. Employers perceive you as a person of promise. Co-workers feel uplifted in your presence. Friends speak of your glow. This is the outer reflection of the inner truth. The divine design has awakened, and man has begun to walk in his right place. It is then that supply increases naturally, for right work carries its own reward. When man performs the task he is meant to perform, he is supported, lifted, and provided for without strain. Money becomes not something to chase, but something that is drawn to him. This is why I tell my students, seek not the job, but the divine idea. For when you follow the divine idea, the job follows you. A beautiful illustration of divine craftsmanship is found in the Bible in the story of Bezalel, who was chosen to craft the tabernacle. Scripture says that God filled him with wisdom, understanding, and skill in all manner of workmanship. This is a perfect picture of man's right work. It is that which he is equipped inwardly to do, that which brings joy in the doing, that which blesses others through its beauty or usefulness, and that which carries its own supply. Bezalel did not strive. He expressed, "So must you express the divine gift within you." And now, having uncovered the divine pattern and set it in motion through your daily work, we turn to the final revelation of this teaching, the inexhaustible nature of supply. For once man is in his right place, the streams of abundance flow toward him without effort, and he discovers the truth of the magic purse of the Spirit, which can never be depleted and which multiplies itself according to his faith. Let us now walk into that understanding, for it is the crown of all prosperity. When man awakens to the truth that supply is spiritual and not material, he touches the heart of abundance itself. He ceases to think of money as something precarious, limited, or dependent on outer circumstances. He begins to see it as a symbol, nothing more and nothing less, of the eternal flow of good that moves through him as effortlessly as breath moves through his lungs. This is the revelation behind what I have called the magic purse of the Spirit. It is not a literal purse, as some imagine, but a state of consciousness, a recognition that one lives in a universe of endless provision, where every legitimate need is met the instant it is formed. When man enters this state, money comes to him in ways so natural, so orderly, so harmonious, that one might say, "Of course, how could it have been otherwise?" For the law of supply always seeks to express itself through the channels opened by man's faith. Let me tell you of a woman who came to me many years ago. She had little more than a few coins in her purse and a heart full of anxiety. She said, "I never seem to have enough." I answered, "You are looking at the purse in your hand instead of the supply within your spirit. Begin seeing your purse as full, crammed, jammed with money. Bless it every time you touch it. Say, 'My purse is always full. It can never be depleted.'" She followed these instructions with the devotion of one drowning who has grasped a lifeline. Each morning she opened her purse and blessed it. Each evening she thanked it for holding her good. At first, nothing seemed to change, but something was changing. Her consciousness was expanding. Within a short time, small sums began coming to her. A neighbor repaid an old loan, a distant relative sent a gift, and she found profitable work she had never considered. Her little purse, once a symbol of lack, became a symbol of endless supply. She later said, "The moment I stopped fearing my purse was empty, it stopped being empty." This is the law. What man blesses, blesses him. What he fears, flees from him. What he condemns, contracts, and what he praises, expands. Thus, Money must never be spoken of as scarce. It must be spoken of as abundant, obedient, and eager to serve its rightful purpose. Money is not a tyrant, it is a servant. It is not a master, it is a tool. It is not something to be chased, but something to be invited by one's attitude. When man ceases to worship money and instead recognizes God as his source, money loses its power to frighten or elude him. It comes and goes freely, always returning in greater measure, because he no longer blocks the flow with fear. There was a man who worked faithfully at a modest position. He earned just enough to cover his expenses, and every month he found himself counting pennies. He feared bills, dreaded unexpected expenses, and lived in constant anxiety. I told him, "Fear is faith in evil." Replace your fear with the affirmation, "God is my immediate and unlimited supply." Bless every bill that comes to you. Say, "This bill is paid by divine order." He obeyed, reluctantly at first, for fear has deep roots. But he persisted. He began blessing his rent, blessing his groceries, blessing even his bank account, though it often held only a few dollars. Something remarkable occurred. His income began to expand through small, unexpected channels. A bonus here, a refund there, a profitable idea that came seemingly out of nowhere. He said, "It feels as though the universe decided to befriend me." Indeed, the universe had always been his friend. He had simply stopped resisting its friendship. Let us consider the law of giving. Many imagine that when they have little, they must hold tightly to what they have. Yet the opposite is true. When man clings fearfully to his money, he blocks the flow of supply, for he declares subconsciously, "There is not enough." But when he gives freely, even a small amount, he affirms abundance. He says, "I have more than enough to share." The subconscious hears this message and begins to arrange conditions that reflect it. I once taught a man who earned a very small salary. He had never given anything away without fear. I told him, "Give something weekly, even if it is only a coin. But give it gladly." He began doing so. Within months, opportunities for extra work came to him, then a raise, then a small inheritance he had never expected. He said, "It is extraordinary. The more I gave, the more I received." I answered, "It is not extraordinary, it is law." Money is movement. It is like the blood in one's body. When it circulates freely, it nourishes every organ. When it becomes stagnant, illness results. Many people suffer from financial stagnation simply because they refuse to let money flow. They hoard, they fear, they cling, and thus they interrupt the circulation of their own good. But when man spends under divine inspiration, without extravagance, without fear, but with confidence that more is coming, he enters the endless stream. He becomes a channel through which supply flows generously. I taught a woman this principle when she hesitated to pay her bills. She feared seeing her bank account dwindle. I told her, "Do not fear paying your bills. Pay them with joy. Say, 'This money blesses all it touches and returns to me multiplied.'" She tried this, though it felt strange at first. Soon her finances improved dramatically. She said, "It is as though money comes back through secret doorways." Of course it does, for giving and receiving are the same movement of spirit. When man enters this consciousness of abundance, others begin to notice a change in him. He no longer walks timidly or speaks with hesitation. He radiates a quiet assurance as though some inner reservoir sustains him. His family notices he is less anxious. His friends remark upon his cheerfulness. His employer senses reliability in him. Opportunities seem to gravitate toward him because he no longer repels them through fear. his whole atmosphere shifts from constriction to expansion, from worry to expectancy, from scarcity to plenty. This transformation is not achieved through effort, but through alignment. Man aligns himself with the infinite by speaking the word of truth over and over, until the subconscious accepts it as reality. He says, "My supply is endless, immediate, and overflowing." He says, "Every day new channels of prosperity open for me." He says, "I expect the unexpected. My good now comes to pass." As he repeats these truths, he chisels away the old thought forms of limitation and builds new patterns of abundance. And once the pattern is built in the visible world must take shape around it. Finally, when man has prepared the way, cleared his heart, expressed his divine gifts, and aligned himself with the flow of abundance, he stands at the threshold of his promised land, the land where wealth does not depend on salary, where opportunities rush toward him, where provision comes before the need, where doors open of their own accord, and where every legitimate desire is fulfilled under grace. It is then that he can declare with authority, "The walls of lack and delay now crumble away, and I enter my promised land, under grace and in perfect ways." And so the journey is complete, not from poverty to wealth, but from fear to faith, not from limitation to freedom, but from false belief to truth. For the truth is, and always has been, this: man does not become wealthy through labor alone. He becomes wealthy when he remembers that his supply is God. When man reaches this point of understanding, when he knows, not merely hopes, that his supply is God, he finds himself standing on entirely new ground. He walks with an inner certainty that nothing can be withheld from him, for he has ceased withholding from himself. The old fears fall away like scales from the eyes. The old anxieties lose their power, for he no longer worships numbers, circumstances, or outward channels. He has entered into the consciousness of abundance, and abundance soon becomes the natural climate of his life. Now the wonderful thing is this: when man enters this promised land of consciousness, the world reflects the change long before he has fully grown accustomed to it. It is as though the universe rushes forward to greet him, saying, "At last you know the truth. Now let the blessings begin." And indeed, they begin, not with great fanfare, but with the quiet unfolding of perfect order. One day, a bill that once would have caused dread arrives, and instead of fear, man finds himself saying calmly, "This bill is paid by divine order." And soon, a way is opened for it to be paid, often through channels he did not foresee. Another day, he speaks an affirmation almost casually. "Money comes to me in perfect ways." And a small but pleasant surprise appears. A refund, a discount, a gift, or a forgotten asset. He knows he is being shown that the law is working, that he is moving in harmony with an unseen current that carries him toward ever-increasing good. As he continues on this path, he begins to feel a new kind of rest. Not the rest that comes after labor, but the rest that comes from trust. He no longer tries to force things to happen, for he knows that divine ideas bring their own fulfillment. He becomes, in a sense, inwardly still, even while outwardly active. This is the rest in action that the sages spoke of, and it is a hallmark of one who lives by spiritual law. He says, "I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free." And in that release, the invisible forces rearrange themselves to meet his need. People around him begin to sense a difference. His employer feels a greater confidence in him. His co-workers perceive him as a steadying influence. His friends feel uplifted by his presence. His household reflects new harmony. Even children respond to him with warmth, for children instinctively recognize peace of mind. And opportunities, those messengers of abundance, begin to knock at his door. He may be offered additional work, or a chance to improve his skills, or a suggestion arises in his mind that leads to increase. The avenues vary endlessly, but the source remains the same. In time, the man who once feared poverty now moves with a quiet dignity, as though he carries with him the assurance that all he needs is already on its way. And indeed it is. For the moment he speaks the word, the law begins its operation, and everything necessary to the fulfillment of his desire is set in motion. It may appear through his job, through a chance encounter, through a new idea, through a financial adjustment, or through a gift. It may come suddenly or gradually, but it comes infallibly, for the law cannot fail. Let us take a moment to consider what happens in the unseen when man speaks the word. The spoken word is a command, an order given to the invisible realm. When spoken with faith, it penetrates deeply into the subconscious mind, which then begins to attract, arrange, and organize conditions that match the vibration of the word. The subconscious does not argue or reason, it obeys, and the outer world reshapes itself accordingly. This is why repetition is essential, for repetition impresses. Long-standing beliefs of lack and limitation may resist at first, but persistent declarations of truth dissolve them, just as water gradually wears away stone. A woman once said to me, "I have spoken affirmations, but nothing happens." I asked, "Do you speak them with authority or with doubt?" She admitted she spoke them timidly, as though hoping they might work. I said, "Speak them as though you are commanding an army, for indeed you are, the army of your subconscious forces." She began to speak with power. Every day, in every way, new channels of supply opened for me. The very next week, she received an offer for extra work that paid handsomely, and within months, her entire financial condition improved. She came to me radiant, saying, it was as though the words finally took root, and so they had. This is why I tell my students, never speak lack, even in jest. Never declare limitation, even casually, for the subconscious has no sense of humor and no concept of exaggeration. It takes every word as a seed and sets about growing it. Speak only the things you wish to harvest. Say, I am abundantly supplied. Say, I expect only good. Say, I am victorious in every undertaking. These words, spoken with feeling, draw your good toward you with magnetic certainty. As your consciousness becomes more and more attuned to abundance, you will find that you no longer fear the future. You no longer dread unforeseen expenses or unexpected changes. You begin to feel that you live under a canopy of protection, guided by wisdom and supported by an invisible helping hand. This is not imagination, it is spiritual law. When man aligns with divine order, the very forces of the universe move on his behalf. And then comes the final realization, the sweetest of all, that wealth is not merely the accumulation of money, but the expression of fullness in every area of life. Man becomes wealthy in peace, in confidence, in joy, in creativity, in opportunity, in friendship, in health, and yes, in money as well. True wealth is a state of consciousness, and once man attains it, no outer condition can take it from him. Even if one channel closes, another opens immediately, for supply flows endlessly through the man who lives by spiritual law. So now I say to you, as one who has watched countless lives transformed by these truths, walk boldly into your good. Declare your abundance. Prepare for your increase. Bless your work. Follow your intuition. Forgive everyone. Spend under divine inspiration. Expect the unexpected. And above all, remember always, your supply is God, and God never fails. And with this knowing, the final veil lifts, and you may proclaim with full authority, the walls of lack and delay now crumble away, and I enter my promised land, under grace and in perfect ways. If you are ready, I will continue into the closing passages and seal the full arc of this teaching. When man has spoken the word, prepared the way, followed the inner voice, released all resentment, and stepped into his perfect self-expression, he finds himself in a new land, a land that feels strangely familiar, as though he had been journeying toward it for many lifetimes. This promised land is not a place on a map, nor a position granted by an employer. It is a state of consciousness where man knows, with quiet certainty, that his good is assured. He no longer questions whether abundance will come, for he feels its presence even before it appears. He no longer asks how supply will reach him, for he trusts the wisdom that has guided him thus far. And he no longer fears the changing winds of life, for he has learned that every change brings a hidden gift, and every closed door leads to a larger threshold prepared for him from the beginning. In this new consciousness, man walks differently. He does not rush, nor strain, nor scramble for opportunities. He moves as one who is inwardly led, who knows that the right idea will come at the right moment, and that nothing can prevent the divine plan from unfolding. He carries himself with quiet dignity, and this dignity is recognized by others. Without uttering a word about his spiritual practice, he finds his environment rising to meet him. People speak to him with greater respect. His employer senses reliability, intelligence, and calm in him. Those who once overlooked him now seek his judgment or assistance. He becomes, without effort, a magnetic center around which harmony gathers. You may wonder how such a transformation is possible without changing one's outer circumstances. But it is always the inner change that produces the outer. When man knows he is provided for, he no longer radiates fear, and fear is the great repellent of prosperity. When he knows his work has value, he no longer diminishes himself before others, and inferiority is the great barrier to opportunity. When he forgives, he releases a burden that once clouded his vision, and clarity invites new paths. When he follows intuition, he is led into right timing, right place, right people, right ideas, and when he prepares for his good, he builds the structure into which the blessing may pour itself. So the outer world merely mirrors back the inner, just as a still lake reflects the trees above it. There was once a man who had labored many years in a modest position. He believed himself fixed in his station and assumed that life held nothing more for him. But he began studying these truths and speaking the words of prosperity with earnestness. Each morning he declared, "God is my unfailing supply, and every day I prosper." He blessed his work instead of cursing it. He forgave those he believed had wronged him. He followed the faintest intuitive whispers. He prepared his affairs as though increase were already on its way. Slowly at first, and then swiftly, his life changed. His employer entrusted him with new duties. A seemingly insignificant investment yielded surprising returns. A friend introduced him to a profitable venture. Within a year, he was earning far beyond his former salary. When he told me his story, he said, "It feels as though I stepped into a river that was always flowing beside me, waiting for me to enter it." I answered, "You entered the river when you changed your words." Indeed, man's words are the currents that carry him. Some drift into stagnant pools because they speak stagnation. Others flow into turbulent waters because they speak fear or agitation. But the one who speaks truth calmly, firmly, persistently, enters the steady rising stream of divine order, where every need is met, every burden lifted, every desire fulfilled, under grace. This is the stream that carries man into his prosperity, even while he remains in what appears to be an ordinary occupation. There is no conflict between spiritual law and practical life. Many imagine that spirituality is somewhere above daily affairs, but in truth, it is the foundation upon which all practical success rests. A man who knows his supply is God performs his work with greater excellence, for he is not distracted by fear. A woman who trusts divine guidance is more valuable to her employer than one who rushes about in confusion. A worker who expresses calm assurance is naturally seen as capable of responsibility. Spiritual understanding does not separate man from usefulness. It enhances it. It gilds the ordinary with the gold of divine intelligence. As your consciousness expands, your salary may increase, or your work may take new forms, or new channels of income may appear. But whether your good comes through your job or through another avenue is of no importance, for you will have lifted your gaze from the channel to the source. You will have learned the great secret. Prosperity is not earned, it is allowed. It comes not from toil, but from trust. Not from anxiety, but from alignment. Not from competition, but from cooperation with divine law. And know this, when man enters this higher awareness, life does not merely bring him what he needs, it brings him what delights him. God is not a miser. Spirit does not dole out supply in measured teaspoons. When man vibrates with faith, he enters into what I call the miracle timing of life, where events unfold with harmony, grace, and delightful surprise. He may receive gifts, opportunities, invitations, creative ideas, or new relationships that lift him into larger expression. He begins to feel that the universe is conspiring for his good, and indeed it is. Nothing in this world is withheld from the man who knows he is one with the source of all wealth. His finances rise, but so does his peace. His opportunities increase, but so does his gratitude. His outer life blossoms, but so does his inner freedom. He becomes, in every sense, a prosperous soul. And now, as we bring this teaching to its fulfillment, I speak directly to your heart. You stand this moment at the threshold of your own promised land. The very fact that you have listened to these words shows that your consciousness is ready to ascend. The law is already turning in your favor. Your supply is already moving toward you. Your opportunities are already forming. Your obstacles are already dissolving. The invisible is preparing to become visible. So I ask you to speak this with me now, in the quiet of your mind, with all the faith you possess. The walls of lack and delay now crumble away, and I enter my promised land, under grace and in perfect ways. Say it until you feel it. Say it until you know it. Say it until the atmosphere around you changes and your world rises to meet the new vibration. For the law can never fail. The word can never return void, and your good can never be lost to you. It moves toward you even now, swiftly, surely, under grace and in perfect ways. And now, having walked with you through these laws, through these living stories, through these images of bondage dissolving into freedom, I gather the whole lesson into a single stream of truth, so that it may take root in the deepest chambers of your being. For knowledge is not enough. The law must be felt. It must be lived. It must be spoken until it becomes the very rhythm of your breath. Only then does man cross from shadow into substance, from fear into assurance, from lack into overflowing good, And so I speak to you now as one who has watched countless demonstrations unfold, not by human striving, but by obedience to spiritual law. Be very still, for the truth that I now speak is the cornerstone of all prosperity. You are not dependent on any outer thing for your supply. You are supported, maintained, and prospered by divine mind alone. Your employment is but one slender channel, and if that channel were closed today, another would open tomorrow, for channels change, but God remains. When you grasp this truth, you cease clinging to circumstances. You hold your life lightly, knowing that the good you seek is already seeking you, and that every avenue of increase is governed by perfect law. Look back for a moment upon the person you were before this lesson began. Perhaps you stood hunched beneath the weight of financial worry. Perhaps you believed yourself bound to a fixed salary, unable to rise. Perhaps you thought your prosperity rested in the hands of another, an employer, an economy, a circumstance. But now, you stand in a new light. You have learned that you yourself are the gatekeeper of your good, that your words are the keys which open or close your treasury, and that nothing can flow into your life that is not first permitted by your own consciousness. Imagine now that the old version of yourself, weighted down with doubt, fear, and resignation, stands before you. Look upon that figure with compassion and say gently, "You did not know the law, therefore you suffered. But now I release you. I step into my rightful place as a child of the infinite, heir to all good, guided by perfect wisdom." As you speak these words inwardly, you may feel a sensation of lightness, as though something long clung to has slipped from your shoulders. That is the old consciousness departing, making way for the new. In this new consciousness, certain things become impossible. It becomes impossible to speak lack, for you know your words are creative. It becomes impossible to resent others, for you know that resentment binds your good. It becomes impossible to fear the future, for you know that divine order governs your steps. It becomes impossible to settle for too little, for you know that God's wealth is boundless. And so you live in a new rhythm, a rhythm of expectancy, gratitude, intuition, and peaceful power. Let us now speak of expectation, for it is the invisible mold into which your good must pour itself. Expectancy is faith wearing wings. When you expect increase, you summon it. When you expect miracles, you prepare a place for them. When you expect only what reason allows, you live within the confines of reason. But when you expect what God allows, you enter a realm where the impossible becomes ordinary. Many people expect disappointment, not knowing that disappointment is simply their own expectancy returned to them. But you will not expect disappointment any longer. From this day forth, you will expect joy, unexpected blessings, delightful surprises, and continual supply. You will say each morning, "Something wonderful is on its way to me today," and because you expect it, it must appear. Now let us speak of your identity. No longer imagine yourself as a small worker behind a desk or a humble employee in a vast system. See yourself as a vessel through which God flows, an instrument of order, beauty, intelligence, efficiency, generosity, and increase. When you enter your workplace, enter as a bringer of divine activity. Do not say, "I go to my job." Say instead, "I go to my channel of blessing. I go to perform the divine idea of this day." As you hold this thought, your very presence will lift the atmosphere around you. Tasks that once drained you will become vehicles of growth. People who once annoyed you will lose their power, for you will understand that no man, no system, and no circumstance can obstruct your good. Your supply comes from within, not from without. Your prosperity arises from your consciousness, not from your employer. You are maintained by God, not by numbers on a page. Let us seal this identity now with a declaration. Say inwardly, I am God's perfect instrument of supply. I radiate competence, confidence, and calm. Wherever I am, I prosper, and all who encounter me are blessed. This is not vanity, it is truth spoken in alignment with divine law. The more you speak it, the more you will see it reflected back to you through respect, opportunity, and financial increase. We now turn to the sacred movement of money, the ebb and flow of supply. Never again fear that money will leave you, for money is a traveler that moves among many houses, returning always to the one who blesses it. Bless every dollar that enters your life. Bless every dollar that leaves your life. Say, this money blesses all it touches and returns to me multiplied. This statement breaks the old bondage of fear and sets money free to circulate, grow, and return. When you fear money, it becomes elusive. When you bless money, it becomes generous. Let us speak also of gratitude, for gratitude is the key that unlocks continual increase. Not gratitude born of duty, but gratitude born of recognition. Recognition that every breath, every idea, every opportunity, every dollar, every meal, every kindness is evidence of the infinite at work in your affairs. When man is grateful, he aligns himself with plenty. When he complains, he aligns himself with lack. Therefore, begin and end each day with gratitude. Let your heart say, thank you for the good seen and unseen, for the gifts already on their way, and for the divine love that sustains me. You will find that a grateful heart is a magnet for miracles. And now, before we close, I give you a final vision. See yourself standing in a great field at dawn. The old shadows lie behind you. Ahead stretches a golden landscape, the promised land of fulfillment, purpose, and unlimited supply. The sun rises gently, and its rays fall upon you, bathing you in warmth and certainty. You feel no fear, for you know that this land belongs to you by divine right. You walk forward, and as you do, the earth beneath your feet blossoms with opportunities, and the air vibrates with unseen assistance. You realize that you are not alone. Every step is guided. Every need is anticipated. Every desire is answered. For you have aligned your consciousness with divine law, and divine law cannot fail. And into this vision, speak once more the words that complete the journey. The walls of lack and delay now crumble away, and I enter my promised land, under grace and in perfect ways. Say it softly, say it firmly, say it until it becomes the very heartbeat of your being. And now, beloved friend, walk forward. Your good awaits you. Your abundance is assured. Your way is prepared. And your life, from this moment on, is governed not by fear or salary or circumstance, but by the endless, unchanging, overflowing supply of God.